Morning, everybody. I hope you're having a good day today. Wednesday morning. We're going to talk about skin today. Somebody asked about psoriasis yesterday. So we're going to go over a little bit about psoriasis, but more about how it's linked to insulin resistance, why it's linked, and how you can help both conditions by addressing one cause. So we're going to dive in just a second. Let me get everything going here. All right. So this is an interesting topic to me, and skin is always interesting because your skin is actually like an early warning sign for many things going on inside your body. So with that, there's a number of issues that tell us that we may be insulin resistant, and we're going to get into those in a little bit. But right now, understand that the link between psoriasis and insulin resistance is so big that people with psoriasis are 3 times more likely to be insulin resistant. And the people with the worst flares and what tend to be the most insulin resistant, as well as people with insulin resistance, a high amount of insulin resistance early on in life, are more likely to develop psoriasis later on in life. So it's a big link. And let's go over some of what's happening. First of all, if you're not sure what psoriasis is, it's these scaly, patchy parts of skin. I got the wrong thing open. Patches of skin that can be painful and itchy, and they can just cause a lot of discomfort. And they're embarrassing for the people who have psoriasis, or the people that I've talked to with psoriasis. And they just kind of want it to go away. Not only does it not look good, it hurts. And no, it's not contagious, but I think a lot of people misconstrue that a condition like that can be contagious. It's not, although it's highly likely that it's genetic for most people. So there is a genetic component. And just like everything else I've talked about with insulin resistance, you may have a genetic disposition to something, but there's always a trigger that sets it off. With a number of things we've talked about, insulin resistance is that trigger. And we're going to go over why and how that happens here too. But understand that there is a huge link between psoriasis and insulin resistance. Now, psoriasis is also an autoimmune disorder, and that means that the body's kind of attacking itself. And I don't have any studies for that, but there's a lot of links between. So I've heard autoimmune doctors say that all autoimmune disease is beginning from inflammation, and most of it beginning in the gut. We know that insulin resistance is causing inflammation and it's causing gut disturbances. And so we've seen a number of things, and Hashimoto's and psoriasis are 2 of them that are very highly linked with autoimmune and insulin resistance. So if you start to get the insulin resistance under control, you can start to get this under control. There's also some studies that show with just typical medications, and one of them, yes, being metformin, that when they start treating psoriasis with these medications and get the psoriasis better, the insulin resistance improves in people. We've seen that when we get the insulin resistance improved, the psoriasis improves. That's a pretty big link, I'd say. I'd say if you're treating one and the other gets better, you're treating the other one and the other gets better. It's very bidirectional. Again, as insulin resistance is with many of these disorders up here, it's very bidirectional. So if you don't want to be treating yourself with all these medications for psoriasis to hopefully get to your insulin resistance, maybe we take a look at treating your insulin resistance to help your psoriasis. But how is all that happening? Most of it is called inflammation. And I'm going to go over insulin resistance and one other piece in here, and some pieces we all need to know about insulin resistance. Because if you're like me, you think that insulin resistance means your whole body's just shutting down to insulin and it's not getting in enough insulin in any of the cells. At least that's what I used to think. And then I started doing more and more research and realized that it actually is a number of things going on. And so when we call insulin resistance, really it's just a high level of insulin and your body is getting resistant to it in many areas, causing some of these diseases. But some areas it's being overreactive to insulin resistance, and psoriasis is in this part. So even though we call it insulin resistance, it's the fact that your skin cells are taking in too much insulin. And nail tapping, your insulin is going in and delivering too much energy. You're going to see this in a couple of other things I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But with psoriasis, it's creating too many skin cells. So you're starting to get these thickened patches of skin that are dry and flaky and cracky because the skin is overproducing in those areas. And what's triggering that is likely too much in related to insulin resistance, sorry, too much energy being delivered to those skin cells. So they want to proliferate in a manner that is not normal for them. It's just too much. So while some cells are shutting down, some cells are taking in too much, and your skin cells take in too much insulin in a number of ways. That's part of what's happening with psoriasis. Another way they're linked is simply through inflammation. So, if you have the genetic component for psoriasis, injuries, cortisol, all of that, if you've noticed, if you have an injury or you have a really stressful day, all of a sudden you have a psoriatic flare. That's because inflammation has been caused in your body, and it's triggering that gene to kick up this inflamed state of psoriasis. Now, how do they link? It's so closely linked between insulin resistance and psoriasis that there are a number of inflammatory markers that are present in both. And I can't remember them all. So we're going to look at those now. Let me get down to that part. So when we look at the inflammatory markers that are linked between insulin resistance and psoriasis, there are two inflammatory markers, or two groups of inflammatory markers that really relate, and that's cytokines and adipokines. So in the cytokines, we have things like IL-7, IL-6, and TNF-A that are all linked. They're all very present in psoriasis and very present in insulin resistance. And so what they're doing is those inflammatory markers can reduce the receptor of insulin in most places in the body, but again, in the skin issues, it's allowing too much in. So, and then we can have higher levels of leptin, resistin, adiponectin, and coumarin in both conditions that are deriving their dysfunction from not insulin resistance, inflammation. Too many eyes in my head today, and I need my tea. That's look, you guys, I'm 60. If you don't know, women in their 60s start to lose a lot of our brain function just naturally. It changes. So yeah, why do I always say I need my tea? When I feel that I'm struggling for words, I understand that I'm not getting enough energy to my brain at the moment, and I need to change that. And the tea does that for me. Okay, so are we on track? Psoriasis is painful, inflammatory, autoimmune, but it's highly linked to insulin resistance. I can't state that enough, that when I look at a condition and say the people with that condition are 3 times more likely to have the condition, that's pretty huge. And so now we're going to start to dive into a little bit about how insulin resistance is causing some of these skin issues, and go over some other skin issues and what insulin resistance is. I talked about it a little bit, and I try to break it down pretty simple because I don't want to go over 20 minutes of insulin resistance every morning unless you need me to. But look, insulin resistance, think of it like a staircase, okay? So step 1 is we're getting too much food in our system too often. Step 2 is that's converting into sugar too much in our system too often. So now we have too much of a source that's converting into too much sugar, step 2. Step 3 is in response to that excess sugar, or sugar at all, we're producing insulin. And then step 4, we're getting these high levels of insulin often. And step 5 is that insulin becomes inundating in the system because we're just feeding the body so much sugar all the time that it's requiring insulin. Now let's go back a step. Why insulin? Insulin is a hormone that's there to deliver energy to your cells. So it's a natural response when we eat to have insulin come up, and that's a great thing. What's not natural and what's not normal is the amounts of insulin that we have coursing through our bodies today, because we're eating unnormal amounts of food that are converting too quickly into sugar. So thank you guys. And I'm just going to get through this explanation, and then we'll come back to some comments. So I'm not ignoring anyone. Please understand that. So now we have too much insulin in the system all the time, and that bumps into insulin resistance, where now there's all of this excess insulin in the system. The insulin is trying to deliver this energy to the cells, but the cells are starting to say, "Ooh, I don't like you. You're annoying me. I'm done with you." Some cells are just like, they're the people that just trudge along no matter what is going on, and they're just going to do their thing. We have some cells who are just doing their thing, taking in the insulin as they need it and ignoring it when they don't. But some cells are in effect just saying, "I can't take any more of you." On the other side, we have cells that are saying, "Ooh, there's excess. Okay, I'll take it. I like this. We'll take in all the excess we can get." Psoriasis lands in this camp as well as a couple of these other things we're going to talk about. So we have this variety of things. So then the next step is going to be from insulin resistance, if it's not caught and treated, which it's not most of the time because most doctors have not been educated on this. Now it becomes prediabetes. After that, again, left alone and not changing anything, it's going to become diabetes type 2. And then that later on is going to, depending on the severity, turn into things like Alzheimer's and dementia. It's going to turn into maybe the pancreas being so overloaded that it starts to shut down and cannot produce insulin anymore. So now a person who was one type 2 diabetic at one point now is functioning more like a type 1 diabetic, where they just can no longer produce insulin. So it's really important to get it under control early, because you have the risk of shutting it down completely and then having to have injections or a pump of insulin later on if you're not dealing with it now. Okay, so that's a little bit about insulin resistance and how we're getting there. But insulin resistance through those cytokines and adipokines that I talked about is causing a lot of inflammation in the body. And it's causing overproduction of some cells. So let's get into some of the other cells. Let me answer some questions first. Autoimmune extreme insulin resistance, where your own body attacks your own insulin. And see that, and I haven't heard it put that way before, but yeah, so again, you can see that insulin and autoimmune are highly linked, right? So the good news is, guys, the good news is that just by addressing the insulin, we can reduce the levels of inflammation, reduce that autoimmune response. It's going to take some time, and I think you know that. When you get to that point, it's not like this is going to change overnight. But if we can figure out what the root cause is and clean up that one piece, then you have a chance of changing um, your health. And I'm sure I would love to talk to you sometimes, and I don't know how to say your name, so I'm probably going to say it wrong as you can, but it would be great to talk to you and get some more information. Maybe we can help somebody else with what you're going through, and I'll do some more research on that as well. But interesting, right? So now another skin condition that's being caused by overproduction of insulin and a cell taking in too much is going to be skin tags. And look, I had them under my arms, in my groin, I had them on my neck. They were starting to even come along on your eyelids, because any place where you rub, that's where those skin tags are going to show up. Skin tags. They're an overproduction of a specific skin cell called keratinocytes. And those keratinocytes, when they're overproducing, unlike psoriasis, where it's causing this thickened patch, these keratinocytes are pushing out and creating these little finger-like or mushroom projections where there's excess skin cells, and that they've got to go somewhere. You don't have to have them cut off. You don't have to have them lasered off. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do really is get the insulin resistance under control so that the skin cells are not overproducing and the skin tags go away. I have none. I have none. I'm not going to show you my underarms, but I have no skin tags. And that happened for me within about 3 months of being on the protocol that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. All I did was address my insulin resistance and the skin tags went away. Did I know that's what I was doing in the beginning? Heck no, I didn't. I didn't know any of this stuff until it started working. And I was like, why is this working when doctors haven't been able to help me for over 20 years? Don't make the mistake of thinking that skin tags are just age. Okay. You don't have to be having those skin tags under, like I looked at them and saw my grandma had skin tags. My mom had skin tags. I started getting skin tags and I'm like, okay, well, I'm in my 50s. I have some skin tags. It's just age. It's just what happens. Don't worry about it. I did not know that it's actually a warning sign that I was sick in my body. So you guys understand, skin tags, although they call them benign, I'm not going to say that they entirely are, because they're a warning. They're a warning that something is happening. Another skin issue that's going to be caused and directly linked to insulin resistance is going to be acanthosis nigricans. It's that condition where you get the dark skin patches. So ashy knees, ashy elbows, and that dry, scaly skin that goes along with those ashy spots. So this has to do with melanocytes, and some of the skin cells that are overproducing melanocytes are what give your skin color. So you might see an increase in the patchy, dark, dark and light patches of skin on people. Sometimes it gets really bad where there's just patches of no color. I'm not going to say that, and I cannot remember the name of that condition, is directly linked to insulin resistance, because I haven't looked that up. But I know that, like, I had dark skin patches around my neck. That's one too. So it's not just elbows and knees, but like if you're getting that ring around your neck, I used to think it was because I was in the sun all the time and that this part just wasn't getting sun and this part was. No, it was an overproduction of these skin coloration cells called melanocytes. I also had really bad melasma along the side of my face, to the point that I always used to say I felt like a character out of Star Trek. Um, you'll know what I mean. But that's all overproduction of these color-giving skin cells called melanocytes as a result of too much insulin. It's getting too much energy, and so you're overproducing. You're going to end up with these spots of darkness around your skin. Now, my elbows used to be 3 years ago were dark from around the back all the way down the elbow, and this was all scratchy, and I couldn't wear satin shirts. I couldn't wear any of that because these would catch. And I was scrubbing away at them. I was putting shea butter and coconut oil and all of these things on my elbows to try and get them to soften up. Thought that I was doing something wrong, like maybe I wasn't washing enough. If you feel that way and you have these patches, understand that it's not an external response, it's an internal response to the fact that you're getting too much glucose, and as a result, you have too much insulin. So we need to understand that. Now, another one is going to be acne. With acne, again, you have this inflammatory response and you have an overproduction. So in your sebaceous glands, just under the skin, it's going to start to overproduce oils and fats, and it's going to start to clog up the skin, and you might end up with something called cystic acne. We've seen a number of people who address their insulin resistance get their cystic acne under control. So it's not just about, again, it's not just about scrubbing on the outside. It's not just about keeping the skin clean. Look, my daughter had cystic acne from the time she was a teenager. So if I had known anything about insulin resistance back then, I could have saved my daughter years and years of embarrassment and care. We did Proactive. We did all the stuff to try and clean her skin. I washed her sheets every night. We did all the stuff, and it was expensive, and nothing was working. Now, as an adult, she had adult acne because of the insulin resistance. Now her acne is clearing up as she's becoming more insulin sensitive, using the same system I do, and a couple of her kids are doing it too. So it can help your skin. Male pattern baldness is another one that comes in with skin issues, and it does have more to do with your sex hormones and overproduction of testosterone and not enough estrogen in the system. And insulin, we'll talk about that when we talk about PCOS again, but insulin is causing a dysregulation in your hormones. Hormones your sex hormones start out as androgens, so think testosterone, DHEA. Then it gets converted into, that testosterone gets converted into estrogen. And when insulin resistance, and I talk about that on another talk, disrupts that, not enough estrogen is being produced and too much testosterone is being retained. Now we end up starting to lose our hair. And yet, and even in women, this is not just men, even in women, you can get this male pattern baldness with insulin resistance. In fact, I was losing hair. I haven't been dyeing my hair because I just wanted you guys to see what it is like. So that's the grays that you see, 60 years old, getting nutrients in, that's all there is. So this spot here was all balding, and I would just keep my hair forward to cover it. That's all grown back in now because I got my insulin resistance under control. So Oh, hidradenitis suppurativa. Very similar to a couple of the other issues. So it's going to show up mostly in armpits and in the groin. Again, thick, scaly, inflamed patches that are very, very painful, and they get really inflamed. Very highly linked to insulin resistance and those same inflammatory cytokines and adipokines as psoriasis. So again, get the insulin under control, and that hidradenitis suppurativa can start to get better because it's not being inflamed and triggered all the time. And let me check for. Thank you, Jenny. Jenny says it's best to try and soak up all this knowledge. All right. So Three Musketeers, just go to my bio, tap on the link up there. It's going to take you to the system that I use to get over my diabetes and hypertension. Same system that we're using for all of this. If you don't have time, you can also watch the rest of this on YouTube later, but just go to the link in my bio and you'll find it there. Now, so we did most of those. All right. So you guys, one of the questions, and these tests can help you understand insulin resistance. If you really want to go in and get a test from your doctor, there's 3 tests you can ask your doctor to order, and that's going to be your A1C. You always want to check your A1C. That's a long-term picture of what your blood glucose is doing. Great, you can do a fasting glucose, but that's only telling you that day. Maybe you had extra sugars that day. Maybe you didn't have extra sugars that day. So that's just a snapshot in time, whereas the A1C is giving us a picture of what's been going on with your blood sugars over about a 3-month period of time and averaging that out to see, okay, so we have a day where our blood sugars were high because we had that cake and ice cream. We have multiple days where our blood sugars are low, and so it averages it out. If the higher that average is, the more likely you are to be insulin resistant and become diabetic and all this other stuff. Jenny says this system has allowed her to have more energy than before. Sleep is better and skin too. Jenny, I can't say enough. Like, I slept last night. I've been really working on trying to get more sleep in my own journey with insulin resistance. And so we talk about that again. When you're under stress and you're not getting sleep, that increases cortisol. Increased cortisol increases inflammation, increases insulin resistance. So sleep is really great to help take care of this too. But I've been trying to get to bed like by 9:30. I think last night was 10:30 because I had some family stuff going on. I still slept all through the night and woke up at like 6 this morning. Normally it's about 5:30, but that's a lot. So 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, and then 6. So 7.5 hours of sleep. 3 years ago, I had sleep apnea so bad that it woke me up 60 times an hour. I no longer struggle with that, and I sleep. I think I did wake up one time because I hydrated so much last night to go use the restroom, but I was so groggy, and I just like, here's a little tip, you guys. If you have to get up to go to the bathroom in the night, open your eyes only a little bit. The less light you get into your brain, the more likely you are to fall right back asleep. So try like, just be that groggy person. If you have to get up in the night, try to not turn a bunch of lights on, do the thing and get back in bed, and you'll be able to go back to sleep quicker. Okay. Love the Bone Fortify too. I'm almost out of Bone Fortify. I have a new order coming, and I ordered 2 because I love the Bone Fortify. That helps with sleep for sure. Good morning, Lori. Okay. And Jenny says 9 months. Jenny, what else has been going on with you? And Jenny, can you tell us why you started the system? So you guys, the system is this, the system that we're talking about, this tea that I'm drinking in the morning, and I did it hot today because I haven't done it hot for a while. And I wanted to make sure I get this whole cup in before I finish my day. And then I'll be going to the ice one, which I've already drank about half of that. So it's a tea in the morning. I'm going to explain why these 2 products in a minute. I did not do the research last night to see like chlorogenic acids and fiber and how they affect psoriasis, and I apologize. So what I'll do is I'll do a short video later today about how the benefits of these directly could be impacting psoriasis. So how I'll do that later because I don't have that knowledge right now, and I will get it for you. All right, so it's a tea that I have in the morning for energy and for satiety, and then in the afternoon I'll have another one to finish me out through the day. Now, you don't have to be 60 years old to have two of these. Our energy levels are dysregulated with insulin resistance, which means most of us are having crashes throughout the day or having breakthrough hunger throughout the day. This helps with both the hunger and the energy and mental clarity. Then, before I eat my biggest meal of the day, or before you eat your biggest meal of the day, you're going to have this, which is, I'm going to have one right now because I do every morning. I just like the effects of the fiber. But this helps you feel fuller sooner, helps keeping you fuller, feeling fuller longer when you eat. And when you take this just before you eat, this is allowing us to slow down the absorption of sugars into our small colon so that we're not having big blood sugar spikes. In fact, scientific studies show that this packet, one of them before a meal, will reduce a blood sugar spike by about 20%. That's huge. That's almost double of what they did studies on that showed that fiber reduced blood sugar just normally. So when we go from, I don't have it here, when we go from something like this, one source of fiber that has the opportunity to reduce blood sugars, we're almost doubling it by doing this because it's 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers. So each of those fibers has a different role in the system, and that's what's important in our system. That's important because when we think about fiber, guys, psyllium husk is great if you just want to clean out your gut and poop a lot, right? Let's talk about that. But psyllium husk can also be really hard on your body. We talked about diverticulitis yesterday, and psyllium husk can actually kind of irritate the diverticulitis in high amounts. So people who are just relying on that high amount of that kind of fiber could be causing more inflammation and problems in the body. A good amount of it is good, but if that's the only fiber you're getting, that there's a problem. And every fruit and vegetable has a little bit of different fiber. Most fruits and vegetables have the insoluble types of fiber. So how do you get soluble types of fiber? Well, I don't want to have to think about that, so I just drink this. Okay, why soluble and insoluble fibers? I'm going to go ahead and add some element to this morning. This is something I've been doing too because I've been starting to walk again, and I noticed this morning my legs were kind of crampy. So we're going to fix that, and I'm going to get my electrolytes in. And I don't represent element. I just really believe in getting electrolytes in. So my fiber is going to be a little salty, but look, we just pour the fiber in, shake it up. That's about as much as I want to shake it, or it's going to get really thick. And then you just drink this down. So now the 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers, I spilled a little, are going to do a couple of different things. The soluble fibers soak up water. So they make a thick gelatin mass. Yesterday you saw it in here, but it's already thickening up. That gelatin mass is what's encapsulating fats and sugars and slowing down the delivery of them into the system. The soluble fibers, they're long strands of fiber. So they're not making this. I always think of the gelatin mass like Flubber, the Robin Williams movie. And then the insoluble fibers don't soak up water. So they'll make this mesh. They start to strand together and they make this mesh or basket in your gut, and that basket holds together the soluble fibers. A little salt on the back of my throat. And that's why it's so magical. Because here we have something that's slowing down the delivery of sugars into the system so that you're not getting the blood sugar spike. But at the same time, we're getting something that's helping us clean stuff out. Although we want to slow down the delivery of food from the gut, we don't want to stop it. Now, the problem with some of the other drugs, the injectables, is they, for all intents and purposes, freeze up the muscles in your gut. So now stuff isn't moving through. That's why you're feeling fuller on the medications. That's why a number of these things are happening. But we've had so many women And I haven't heard men, so I'm not going to lie about that. But I've had so many women report to me that they've ended up in the hospital with gastropariasis, where the stomach just stopped moving food together through altogether, and they have a blockage in their intestinal system, and that has to be removed because it becomes toxic. So we want to slow down the delivery, but we want to do it in a healthy way, and the medications are causing a lot of problems. This product is actually teaching your gut to be stronger and adding to the gut's ability to motate or move stuff along. But because of the bulk of it, it's helping us slow down how quickly that goes through. Whereas the drugs are starting to slow down the muscle contraction to not allow the food to go through. And it's really not encapsulating anything to slow down the sugar delivery when it gets there. The hope is that it's going to sit in the gut for a while longer and not have that high sugar spike. But what we need to understand is the root cause is the sugar going through our system too quickly because there's no fiber attached to most of the sugars we have now, especially when we're talking packaged and boxed things. And I talk every morning about how our natural foods have been modified as well. In fact, if you just go do a Google search, what our foods used to look like, you'll see the difference in the size and density of our food. And how did our foods double, triple, quadruple in size? They stripped fibers out. They stripped enzymes out. A lot of times things like proteins are stripped out, especially in our grains. They've taken away all of the outside and they've just given us the starchy part on the inside, and that's causing a problem. So we need to understand that. And that's why the fiber, that's why I do this. Now, for me, I have a little bit of acidic gut. I call it a native gut. It's just acidic, always has been. So I use that. Now my gut, I wasn't having the problem this morning, but now my gut's calm. I'm going to feel fuller longer. This is not going to break my fast. It's actually going to help me with ketone production now in a fasted state. Because when that goes in, this is called a prebiotic, and your bacteria in your gut start to feed on it, the good bacteria in the gut. And when they're feeding on it, they're producing short chain fatty acids. Those short chain fatty acids help us to produce ketones because now we're telling the body, hey, we want to burn fat for fuel. So we skipped a step, right? Insulin is telling us that our body is in sugar burning mode. Insulin is delivering sugar to the system. But while insulin is present, we can't do fat burning because insulin is anabolic. It wants things to grow. So it's going to hold on to all the hard work it's done. But it's also cueing our body that we need sugar. So now you're having cravings for candy bars and potato chips and those soda pops and anything to give you that energy from high loads of sugar, which is just making the problem worse. So one of the best ways to get your insulin down, besides these couple of things, is some intermittent fasting. My dinner last night was a little late. I think I ate about 6 p.m. Had some amazing chicken cordon bleu, high protein, high fats, and that was it. Then I don't snack. I don't have popcorn or chips or anything like I used to have at night. So now we are 15 hours into a 16-hour fast. Easy. But even at that, at this 15 hours, when I have this ketone production, because because the bacteria are eating this and calling it or creating short chain fatty acids, my ketone levels will actually go up between now and the time I actually eat, which is probably not until 11. That's when I normally eat, 11 or noon. So the fiber is helping with a lot of things. Now, why 2 tea in a day? Why am I having this tea? This tea actually shuts down your hunger, both in your gut and in your brain. So what it does is that little bit of don't move so much gut and distension in the gut is occurring with something from chlorogenic acids, which are highly concentrated in this particular tea. The same chlorogenic acids are getting energy to the brain. So we don't talk about a lot of people don't think about a lot. When you have insulin resistance, it's happening in your brain just as much as it's happening in your body. one of the reasons you're perceiving hunger, besides leptin and ghrelin and cortisol all being off, is that your brain just doesn't have energy. So when your body doesn't have energy, you're going to feel hunger because it's saying, hey, I need an energy source. And we're stuck in sugar burning mode because we've trained our body that insulin needs to be out all the time. And so we start craving. For me, it was like Snickers or Reese's cups. I bought a package of Reese's the other day, and oh my God, it tasted like just a pure cup of sugar. And I'm like, how did I eat these all the time before? Because my body was in a different mode. Now, when we get insulin levels down through intermittent fasting, the component hormone glucagon can come out, and glucagon is really trying to raise our blood sugar, but it's doing it by pulling fats out of the liver. It's going to pull a lot of fats out of your liver if you have a fatty liver first. It's converting those glycogen stores in the liver and the fats in the liver back into a usable source of energy, which can spike your insulin if you're extremely sugar driven at first. Can spike your blood sugars at first. It's going to get better over time. Um, but the body also has a back door to get those sugars from fat that's broken down into especially like the muscle cells of your body. So fasting is not depleting you. We're just opening up different pathways that don't require insulin to be there to deliver it when we're in fat burning mode, which is where I am now. So now my ketones are going up. The little messenger saying that I need to burn fat for fuel because I haven't eaten for 15 hours. I'm not hungry. I don't feel weak. I don't feel any of that. And actually, you'll find when you start doing some intermittent fasting, and Lori and Jenny, you guys can chime in. I actually feel like I have more energy. I feel like I slow down more when I'm stopping to eat, especially after a big meal. When I'm fasting, I feel like there's more energy, more mental clarity. Yeah, in the beginning, you can have some hunger pains because your body's so driven for that sugar that it has to slow down and say, hey, we don't have to have sugar all the time. In the gut, this is random, but it just popped into my mind. In the gut, when we're feeding the gut sugar, when we're feeding our body sugar, it's not just in the bloodstream, it's in the bacteria in our gut. Now we're feeding what we call the bad bacteria, things like yeast, and they're growing and overgrowing in the system. So with insulin resistance also comes things like yeast infections on the skin, in the groin, the folds of the groin where stuff is just kind of sitting, especially for ladies. It can cause yeast back up in your urinary tract and cause urinary tract infections. It can cause you to have an itching anus where you have just too much of this bacteria growing in these areas, right? So now you're like, why do I have all these skin issues? And now I have yeast infections constantly. What's going on? It's the too much sugar and too much insulin. Get that under control, and those things can get better. So the system that I do helped me. My A1C was 7.4 when I started. It's now 5.3, which means I'm no longer diabetic. My A1C is fine. My blood sugars in the morning run anywhere from 96 to 101. I still have some stuff going on, which is a great range to be in. And my triglycerides are down to a normal level, as well as my HDL. I haven't had those tested in about a year. But all I do is the system. And I was on 13 medications. I'm not on any of those anymore. And that's really a relief to me. So for $5 a day, natural products, do some intermittent fasting. I focus on this. When I eat, and one of the biggest questions is, how do I eat? You guys, can I ask a question really quick while I'm talking about what I eat? I had somebody ask the other day for a food list. Now, I have been really resistant to doing a food list because we all eat differently. And I don't want people to see this as a restrictive thing. I want people to just be able to focus on these principles that I give. But I'm understanding that a lot of people just don't understand what those macros are and what foods lie in those areas. Would it be helpful for me to create a list of the foods you should be focusing on and the foods that are going to help you with this? Or because it's in Dr. Bickman's book, you guys, and I haven't done it because nobody's going to say it better than Dr. Bickman. So here's the thing. If you want a list, I'm gonna retract it. If you want a list, get Dr. Bickman's book. And in the back of it, he talks about how to eat and what to eat. And he gives you lists and he gives you all of this stuff about vitamins and minerals and what's benefiting you and what it's doing. So I would really just, for 15 bucks, I would get the book and pay attention to the foods he says. That's where I'm going to go with it. I don't need to create something else. Um, for me, I do this. I do fiber before I eat every time I eat. Um, so I'm using more than one fiber a day. I'm using 2 a day, sometimes 3, because I like to have a fiber in the morning. I like to have a fiber in the morning. The more study I've done on fiber and the more I know I need it, just to make sure I'm getting enough fiber, because I'm not perfect and I eat some foods that I shouldn't from time to time. So I have 2T and 2 fiber a day, but the system is really just 2T and 1 fiber a day. Um, and that's all I had to do to get off of these medications. So you guys, it's been changing so many other lives. And like I have I have a woman who's lost over 160 pounds. I have a man who's lost over 190 pounds. But let's talk about the other stuff, because the weight stuff happens, right? The weight stuff is going to go along as you start to feel better. But what's more important is the people who are getting their liver cleaned up, the people who are seeing a reduction in visceral fat, which means all of their organs can start to function properly. The people with kidney problems or urinary tract problems are starting to get better. People with hypertension are feeling better. People with psoriasis who are consistent with the system are saying they're not having psoriatic flares. People with skin tags have had those go away. Joint problems have seen that gets better because inflammation is eating up your joints. So it's just all across the board. My daughter-in-law tends to get frustrated because she's like, "Oh, mom, you think everything is related to insulin resistance?" Well, science says that 95% of the illness that we suffer from today is directly related to this whole insulin resistance thing. And with 93% of us having some type of metabolic disorder and insulin resistance, yeah, it kind of does link to almost everything that we're suffering from today. There's a few things, maybe not. There's some genetic disorders. Maybe somebody was born with a small hole in their heart, so their heart's just functioning differently, or a number of other genetic disorders that could happen. Like my grandson has one that has a DNA disorder that he cannot process fats. So there's all of those things that happen. But the majority of us, 95% of our diseases and disorders, are linked to insulin resistance, and that's from scientists. So that's why I'm here linking all these things so you guys can start to see that picture. My biggest thing is if you use the system and you do this intermittent fasting and I coach you through it and you start to get the insulin resistance out of the room, out of the body. I call insulin resistance like the elephant in the room. So why was I on 13 medications? Because I had, let's take a look, because I had all these things. I had neuropathy, I had brain fog, I had fatigue and fibromyalgia, PCOS, hypothyroid. My hormones were all out of whack, which, by the way, they're not all now in normal range, even my sex hormones for my age. And I had headaches and sleep apnea and diabetes and arthritis and vertigo, skin takes, melasma. I had hair loss. I had edema and neuropathy. I had my kidneys were starting to have problems. I had gallstones and my liver was failing. So I had all of that. That's why I'm here talking about it. And all of that got better just by doing this system and understanding that insulin resistance was the problem. Now, because I didn't start it sooner, and this is again why I'm here, because nobody talked to me about it sooner, there was a lot of damage that happened in my body over the last 40 years living on insulin resistance. And one of them is that I lost my gallbladder. One of them is that I lost 3 joints, both hips and one knee have been replaced. Another one is that the long-term hypertension caused some damage to my heart. I don't want that for any of you guys. And if it's as simple as understanding that insulin resistance is the root cause and you can address it more naturally like this and get off of all the medications, hopefully, work with your doctor on that and have a better life, then amazing. And then if you get that cleared out of the room and your insulin resistance is now under control and you still have some underlying thing, guess what? Now it becomes easier for your doctor to start to figure out what's really going on with you. Back in the day, the doctors were kind of like throwing darts at this, this, this. Okay, here's this. She has hypertension. Let's give her lisinopril and gabapentin, and let's cycle her through medications because nothing is bringing her blood pressure down. Blood pressure was at 180 over 150 at some point during every day. The lowest is the lowest. I've said this so many times, you guys. The lowest it would get to in a doctor's office was 150 over 110. That was charted. Um, and my blood pressure this morning on a walk, on a brisk walk, was 122 over 114. So my heart rate was up, and that's when your blood pressure is going to go up a little bit. And yet it was 122 over 114 in the middle of a walk this morning. In the past, that would have raised my heart rate so much that it would have been painful. And I don't know if any of you have high blood pressure, but it gets to be painful when it's that high. So all I did was address this, and now we can start to see other things that may be going on with my body and address those. And that's what I would hope for you. Get that elephant out of the room, start to feel better, and you'll start to do better. I was just out in the hallway this morning after my walk talking to a lovely little lady who lives in the same complex as me. And she used to be an RN, and we had a conversation about the system. I got to take her down some information, but she saw me out on my walk and she saw me going up and down stairs, and I carried in packages for her. Um, and I was telling her about the system and that I used to have a walker, a cane, and disability plates. I still have a disability tag that I keep in my car because my grandson's disabled. But I don't have any of that anymore. And if you were to see me walking around or doing stuff, you would never guess that I was using a cane 3 years ago, that I had a walker, but I hated to use it. So that thing stayed in the car, but I never really used it. That's the kind of change that you can make when you address insulin resistance. Okay, high cortisol levels when you started this. Yeah, I had high cortisol levels when I started this. Yes, I did. Lots of stress, very little sleep. That's all going to raise your cortisol levels. Um, there is a misconception that your cortisol levels are going to get out of control when you're fasting. Cortisol levels rise just a little bit when you're fasting, and that's because it's cueing your body to open up and get energy moving. That those levels start to normalize the longer you're consistent with this protocol. So, yeah, subscription is Jenny. You're such an amazing. Oh, thank you so much for helping. Um, the system is expensive. Let's talk about that. And I'm going to invite you to have a thought shift. So I was on 13 medications, $10 a copay for those minimum. So say minimum, I'm spending $130 a month on medication, plus going to the doctor's office twice a month, plus having MRIs and CAT scans and ultrasounds and all the stuff done to try and figure out what's going on, plus having injections in my joints because they were painful and failing, plus all the other stuff. I went from eating really bad food. You guys, when you eat cheap food, let's be honest, because I was there too. We spend way more on that packaged crappy food than we allow ourselves to think. So when you shift to eating whole and real food and prioritizing protein and fats and limiting your carbs, costs more than carbs, yes. But does it cause you less medical issues, and you have to eat less because proteins are the most satiating of the macronutrients? That's all true too. So what happened for me was I spend $5 a day. The system is about $5 a day for both drinks. So for all of this, for these three things, it's about $5 a day. One soda that most of you are drinking is $2.50 to $3. One candy bar is over $1. One bag of chips is a couple of bucks. You start adding up all that stuff that you're eating because your body is insulin resistant and you're craving sugars and salts. You're spending way more now on that $5 a day, and it's destroying your health. So you got to make a change to see a change. If you continue on the path you're on, it's not going to change. You have to understand that what we're really doing is just putting back what's been stripped out so your body can work normally. Now, my food budget, because I'm one of those people that puts everything in a spreadsheet. My budget is projected out for 6 months ahead of time. But what I noticed is that the amount of money I was spending on food, even though I'm buying higher quality food, went down because I wasn't having all these snacks that we don't count, all the times we stop off and get something because we're hungry and we have a craving that we're just not adding into our budget because we don't want to look and see what we're spending. $5 a day is not expensive, and most of us spend way more than that on stuff that's not improving our health. So make that mindset shift and then make the choice for yourself. Because children should have HPV. I'm not that kind of, I don't talk about that. That's not my gig, and I'm not a doctor. Um, so, and then if you guys just go to my profile link and use that link up there. Yep, I load up on protein too. So what I ate yesterday, I buy raw meat and I try to buy grass-fed, organic, free range, whatever. You don't have to, but that's what I try to do because now that I understand I'm not spending so much on all the boxed, bagged stuff, I have more room to spend money on good, nutritious food. Last night before I went to bed, I was giving a lot, I think a lot about a lot of things, but I was amusing myself with the amount of money I used to spend on food that wasn't adding to my health and was actually tearing my health down. And now my fridge doesn't have a lot in it because it's primarily protein. I have one little tiny cabinet that has some baking and stuff in it, but I don't have packaged foods in my house. I have one little cabinet that has, baking soda and cocoa powder and all of that in it, maybe some oil, olive oil, um, but I don't have maybe some canned goods too, but I don't have loads of boxed or packaged stuff in any of my storage here at home. I eat very clean and I mean, not very clean because I still eat other stuff, but I do what Jenny said, prioritize protein and fats, and I stay fuller longer. I'm spending less money. Bottom line, I'm eating better food, spending less money, and then investing $5 a day. My overall budget went down when I started the system. So that's hard to look at. Like you guys, it's a 1 month supply. So you look at it and you think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. But how many times do you go to the grocery store and spend that amount? Like I was spending that amount every week on groceries. And now I go to the grocery store and buy my stuff for almost a month and never really go back. I'm saving money. Plus, I have a way better quality of life. I'm able to get out and walk. I'm not stuck to the couch because I'm in pain, all of that stuff. So it's all in our perception. And so it's just a perception shift, a reality shift that I would invite you to make. If you're investing in your health, there's so much more that goes along to it than just $5 a day. You're getting so much more return from it. And that's where I'd like you to shift at looking. And if you can't make that shift, that's fine. But everyone else that can, please make that shift. All right. But the children thing, eating Takis right now, death to my heart. No, my God, my daughter used to love Takis. Those are so horrible. But hey, you do you. But you know what? I eat some things that are still horrible too. Like there's a really great little cupcake place in town, and every once in a while, on my way to my kids' house, I'm like, my daughter-in-law loves them, so I'm like, I'll grab a cupcake for everybody. So I don't eat perfect either. We all have our vices, right? But man, Takis, whew, that, that's one food that I don't allow in my house ever. Okay, they taste good, but I will be sick if I eat those. All right, so you guys, that's it. The system really helps. I'm going to go to work and get the research on the components in the system and how they're directly affecting psoriasis for the better. And I'm talking about the components because there's no scientific study on unicity and psoriasis. But I can give you the links to how these components can be helping you with that and your other skin issues. And I'll get that up today. We're going to come back tomorrow. Somebody asked me to talk about Hashimoto's. So we're going to talk about Hashimoto's and thyroid tomorrow and how insulin resistance is interacting with that disorder as well. Somebody mentioned cortisol, you guys. Before I get off, manage your stress, get some sleep. The best thing you can do for your health are those two things, first of all. And then understanding our food is just imperfect. And we gotta just make do with what we have and fill in where we can in the meantime. And that's why I love the system, because it's just giving me back the things that were stripped out so I can live my life and not be worried about buying special food or buying special things. When I'm in an airport, which in a couple of weeks I'm flying back to see my mama, she's so excited, and I am too. She's in Montana. So I'll be on airplanes most of the day or traveling from Washington to Montana to go help her. And so how do I do that? And how do I have real food and health and super healthy food during all that? I probably don't. So then I use this as a prophylactic to help me from that week that I'm going to have of mom trying to feed us because that's her love language. So you guys, we'll see you in the morning. We'll talk about Hashimoto's. If you want the system, just go to the link. I'll put it over here on Facebook and YouTube for you guys. If you have questions, there is a way to get a hold of me on WhatsApp, and it's right in this link as well. So please go there. And if you have questions, ask me. I'm not pushy. I'm not going to try to tell you you have to get it. I'm going to answer the questions, and then you guys get to make your decision. So we'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Hashimoto's in the morning. Bye, guys. Have a great day.